Kia ora noa, I'm Rachel, welcome back to my channel. It was all about well-being and activism, and this is the final part in a short series that I'm starting with on my advice for new activists. I was planning on having another 2 parts. There was a little one I wanted to do about thinking about what you bring to your activist experience and group organizing and stuff like that in terms of personality and behavioral stuff like introverts and extroverts, and maybe some family dynamics history that you might bring in terms of the roles that you play in groups, and also thinking about your wider dominant culture and how that culture deals with conflict or decision making, that kind of thing. But I found every time I went to do it, I struggled to talk about it in a way that wasn't very much about my own story and my own experiences, and that's not really what I want for this particular series. So I'm just going to park that, and please let me know in the comments if you would like to see that video in the future from a more personal perspective. But in the meantime, I'm going to move straight on to my last piece of advice for new activists. And I've said every video, but I'll say it again, I'm not an expert. I'm just somebody who has had some experience with activism and is sharing some reflections. And these are things that I think it's good for new activists to take on board, but it's also something that I'm learning and relearning all the time as I go. So this is advice for me as well, as I try to keep well-being in the forefront of my own activism. So this final piece of advice today is know that there are so many more of us than you think there are. I feel like I don't know if this is everyone's experience, but I feel like when I came into activism in my early 20s and then again in my 30s, that I felt like we were this very small group of specially awoken people who were struggling against the big wider machine to make change. And I think for one that's not as true as it feels, and also there's some unhealthy things about that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. I've been coming back to this again and again in this series, this issue of burnout, because this is what we're really trying to prevent here with these kind of discussions. And the kind of strangely nice thing about, is nice the right word? The kind of maybe heartening thing about thinking about burnout is that, in the high rates of activist burnout, is that it means that there are a lot more of us. There are a lot more of us than it feels like there are at any given time when you're in the struggle. I remember when when I started hanging out with anarchists, and we'd be working on a particular project that felt so crucial and important, and I would occasionally come across in anarchist spaces some people who had obviously been very involved before but weren't now, and were just kind of hanging around the edges and seemed a little bit tired and unsure and cynical. I remember feeling kind of baffled that they weren't on board with the cause that we were on. Like, this stuff's so important, why aren't you in, kind of thing. And it didn't take me long to realize why. One of the first people that I made really good friends with, she was a fabulous woman, and I was really excited about her friendship, and I was also spending quite a lot of time with her because we volunteered together at the same thrift shop. And she would always be talking to me about all of her frustrations with the anarchist scene. And at the time, that was a little bit of a bummer, really. Like, it was a little bit annoying, because here I was all very excited about this group of people and really, really stoked to be doing some stuff and hanging out with people who I felt were very like-minded to me. And I was also new to the city as well, so I was like quite invested in making friends with a lot of people in this group. So it was a little bit of a bummer, but, of course, within a few months, I was right there with her grumbling about all the same things because they were real issues, I guess what that sort of experience taught me is that the people who are on the outside of these movements, who have been marginalized by these movements because of frustrations or exhaustions, they're still our people too, and it wasn't long before that friend burned out of the scene. And I was in that scene for about, active in that scene for about 3 or 4 years. And during that time, I saw a lot of people come and go. And, I've kept a strong group of friends from that time. But when I think about that small group that I've kept, there's people that came before us. And I don't know hardly anything about those people that came before us, hardly anything about the people that came after us since I stopped actively working with that scene. And when I imagine all of us in that trajectory, the people that came before us, the people that will be after us, that gives me quite a lot of hope, that there's so many of us attracted to this kind of work. And I think if we could keep those people, if we can stay in the work, we would be formidable, we're more mighty than we can feel that we are, I suppose is what I'm saying. But, it can feel easy to feel like we are this little small elite, and it makes me think about, and there's something attractive in that, I think. So maybe in some ways we choose to think that we're this special group. It's kind of easy to look at other people who have dropped out and think, oh, you're just not as committed as I am, or you're not as passionate, or you just don't have the chops or something. And that is bullshit and also quite damaging. And it makes me think of a conversation I had once with somebody who was talking about doctors, and how doctors in places like Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I'm sure in many other Western cultures, are seen as this special elite and see themselves as this special elite. They've worked hard, they've done years and years of training, they've racked up a lot of student loan bills for themselves. And so there's only this small group who can do the work that they can do, and it makes it really hard for them to actually advocate in their workplaces for better working hours, for example, and different things that are really important and needed to take care of themselves and make sure that they're doing the best work that they could be doing. Because who else is going to do the work? They're this special elite little group. And yet in other countries, and this is just something I've heard, so I may be completely wrong about this, please, if you know better from other countries, let me know. But this person was saying that in South America, doctors are not seen in that same way. They're more of the class of people of, say, teachers. It's quite a normal thing to go and become a doctor. And so they've got things a little bit more in balance in that way. They're not seen as this special group who have this kind of heroic, well, if nobody else is going to do it, so we have to do it attitude. And I thought that was very, very interesting. And also, as this person was telling me this, I was like, we're a little bit like that. Actually, we're a lot like that in the activist scene. It can easily feel like, if we're not going to do it, who's going to do it? And I found that both in the anarchist scene and in sexual violence prevention and response, the small elite group who are sort of like, well, we're the only people who really cares about this. We're going to accept the fact that we are underpaid and working these terrible long hours because somebody's got to do it. And I think thinking about the fact that there are so many more people out there that would be doing the work, that have been doing the work, and will be doing the work after we leave if we do end up burning out, lessens some of that delusion that we are such a small group and only we have to carry it on our shoulders, and maybe some of the anxiety of gosh, the problems are so big and we're so small. It makes me think too about the need to not only change the way that we're doing our activism, or maybe we don't have to change it, but maybe broaden it, have more options available for people to stay in the struggle. But also making it okay for people to stay in the struggle. So by that I mean, when I was working in anarchist communities, I was in way too many collectives. I signed up for a lot of different projects, and I felt like if I wasn't working on these projects or multiple projects, I didn't have a right to or a reason to hang out with the people that were in those projects that I wanted to hang out with. And over time that shifted, and I was, I wrote on my fridge, less collectives, more coffees, to remind myself it's okay to just socialize and have conversations with people in the scene without signing up to do all these campaigns and volunteering. So I think for 1 year, giving yourself permission to just do one or two things, and sometimes not be doing things, to stay in the scene without actually doing active work when you need a break. And that makes me think too of a friend of mine who burnt out from activism and needed a break for a while. I hope she doesn't mind me telling this story. Well, actually, there's no real story, just this main sort of idea that she had, which was that she wasn't working on any projects, but she could be the person who people came to have a wine, like, I mean a glass of wine, but actually also a wine, like a bitch about all of the problems and everything that was happening. She was somebody who was there, who understood what it was like to be in the struggle and could be a listening ear. And there's real value in that, I've even sort of been reflecting with myself about starting this channel and how maybe it's a little bit strange, because at the moment I'm not involved in any campaigns. I'm caring for my 2-year-old, and that's been a whole new learning experience of how completely involving being a parent is. I find that I struggle to, do the odd toy library shift, or, I have the best intentions to one day make it to a play centre meeting. This is the extent of my community organising at the moment. But I sort of say to myself, there is a role for the people who are there who might not be actively doing some of the work, but who just understand and are a listening ear or have some reflections. So that's one piece of advice, stay in the social scene if it feels comfortable to. Obviously not if it's been a toxic experience and you just don't want to be anywhere near those people anymore, because that can happen. But if it feels possible to, stay in the social scene. And on the flip side of that, if you're not feeling burnt out, if you're feeling great and excited and new, make space for those people who need a break, value them and know that they have stories to tell, and know that they have a lot of great things to share, and that they could share some great strategies and some great friendship with you as well. So from both sides, have coffees with people who aren't doing the work, have coffees with people who are doing the work if you're not. I always say coffee. I don't even really drink coffee, but whatever you like, tea, wine, whatever's your jam. But yeah, that makes me also think of this issue of broadening the ways that we work and thinking about other ways that we might work. Because one thing that I've been thinking about with this issue of there are so many more of us than we think that there are, is just this issue of getting older, having other commitments like children, like maybe paid work that becomes more important to you. I think often activist scenes can be very full up with people who are mostly students or who have not long ago been students and are still just kind of cruising a little bit while they work out what their paid work situation is going to be. As we go on in our lives, different, like, larger pieces of work might become important to us as well, which might make volunteer organising, for example, harder to commit to. And also, I think if it's a very youth-driven scene, socially it's harder for older people or people who have different commitments, who need childcare, for example, who have long work hours, to make it to all the meetings and all the ways that kind of organising is often structured. So when you're in it and you develop it, you know, when you're young and you've got more time and you're developing all of those particular ways of working that are very high energy and high contact and high intensity and very socially driven, that's an awesome time. But I think that if you're in that situation now, it could be worth thinking about and maybe developing some skills around or some plans around or something. I'm not sure exactly, but starting to think now about ways that you might work in the future if you have other commitments or if you're not able to work in the ways that you are now. Broadening the ways that we do activism so that it's more possible to stay in it for or dip back in and out for a longer period, to stay in it for a longer time. Because this is something that I want for myself. I want to be able to do this work throughout the course of my life. And like I was saying before, you know, if everybody who has left was still in, we would be formidable. I want to see that for our movements. I want to see that not only that size of people and commitment, but also that retention of knowledge and stories. Yeah, keeping all of that social and political history in the movement as well alive. And that kind of, as a side point, brings me to another thing I think is important to think about in terms of, you know, there are more of us than you think, and just as a point of well-being is to think about the history of your movement and knowing the history of your movement. If you can, talk to people who have been involved for a long time, or you know, if there are written things available in archives, read them, because that sense of being a small part of a bigger struggle, I think, is humbling and also hugely inspiring, and can again bring down that anxiety of we have to do it all right now and there's only this few of us. It helps to remember that we all just do our little piece, you know, we do our little part, and then the struggle continues in all kinds of different ways. We're part of a web of people moving to change together. This brings me to the other sort of thought about there being more of us than you think. And that's just to not only think about broadening the ways that you might be active in the struggle, but also broadening the ways you think about who is active in the struggle. You know, again, when I was an anarchist and in sexual violence prevention, there's with both, there's a very, you can have a very fixed idea in your mind of who the activists are, who the people who are making the change are, what they look like, what they dress like, the language that they use, how they relate to people, what their beliefs are. But the older I get, the more I find that there are people in all kinds of settings who are working for change and in wonderful ways, and you'll come across them in all kinds of places. And I think that, you don't necessarily have to go into all of those places and make friends with all those people. But just knowing that is so important, because I think it makes the struggle less lonely. And it also is a reminder that if you are in a toxic environment in your particular organization or group, that, again, like I've been saying throughout this series, you will find people in other places to do the work with in different ways. And that might be in ways that surprise you, People can have some quite different language and some quite different ways of working, and still be fabulous to work with and still be doing some wonderful work. I think this comes back to some of the stuff I was talking about last time as well, about not needing to convince everybody that your way is the right way. We can all be part of this web of change together and have different pieces of the puzzle and be able to reach different groups of people. So yeah, that I think this is me for this short series on advice for new activists. That, I guess, the heart of this piece of advice, of knowing that there are more of us than you think there are, is that you don't have to carry it all. There are so many people out there carrying this stuff as well. And if we can make this all easier to carry together, there would be more of us actively in the struggle, So this is just my real plea and my real call to action, is how can we make our movements fun and healthy and possible to stay in for the long run, because there are so many people who care, and it doesn't have to be a struggle to be in the struggle. I really believe that. I think we can do things differently. I'm still trying to find what those ways are, and I'm really looking forward to moving forward with this channel and having as many conversations I can with as many people as possible about what that might look like. So thank you for joining me for these short videos, and please continue to join me. I'd love to hear in your comments below if what your experience is of feeling like, do you feel like you're in a small group and nobody else is interested? Do you see those shady people hanging around the edges who look like they want to still be in but are hurting? Are you one of those people who've dropped out and are, struggling to want to do something for your community but not sure how? I know that we're out there, and I'd love to hear your experiences of where you're at now. So yeah, I'll see you again in a couple of weeks for my next video. Ka kite, noho ora mai, take care.